If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for another special midweek episode of the show. Really appreciate you being here. If you think back on your childhood, all of us have things that we point to as pretty much being the most frightening thing that's ever happened to us. But when you think about it, in most cases, it wasn't all that frightening. Of course, back then it was because you were a kid. So naturally, what was frightening back then could very easily be dismissed as not all that big of a thing when you grow up. But tonight's guest had an experience, unfortunately, when he was 13 that you can't dismiss that way. It was frightening no matter what, no matter how you try to classify it. Well, without any further ado, let's bring him in here now so we can talk about that. Tonight's guest is Austin Moore. Austin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Vic. Thanks for having me, man. It's an honor being here.
Well, it's an honor to have you. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir.
Austin, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
My name's Austin Moore, 31 years old, originally born in Charlotte, North Carolina, moved to Tennessee when I was a teenager. I make music. I have a 10-year-old son, and, I'm super blessed.
That you are. It's good you realize that. Why'd you make that move, though, to Tennessee?
My parents ended up separating. So, it was a quick shift, a quick decision my mom made at the time. So she packed up me and my brother, and we went to Tennessee.
Ah, I see. Was there much in the way of culture shock, or did you hit the ground running?
It was a little bit of a culture shock just because coming from more of an urban place out of Charlotte into Tennessee, it was a little different, but we got adjusted to it.
Well, that's good. That's really good. Austin, you were in the 8th grade when you had your encounter. Can you think of any lasting effects that you're experiencing to this day due to what happened to you that night?
Not really. Just the more fact of the unknown, the fascination of knowing why and maybe how these things experienced. So more or less that's probably it.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it didn't take me long when we spoke the other day for the first time to understand that you're obviously a well-adjusted man now, and there might have been some hangups you suffered from, but they're not evident. So as long as we can say that, that's a great thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It definitely is. Your encounter happened near Gatlinburg, Tennessee. How far into the country was the place where it actually happened?
So I was in the Sevierville area, and I don't know if those who have ventured off to Pigeon Forge or Sevier County, but there's a place kind of near, it's Market Square area, and it's not too deep into the country, but it's outside of the city limits, and that's where I was at my friend's house. So,
speaking of your friend, you had him with you at the time. What can you tell us about him?
Oh man, Wade. As I told you the day before when we were on the phone, he passed a couple years ago. But he was such a bright kid, very smart. He was full-blooded Native American and just a good childhood friend, somebody who would have your back.
Yeah, he does sound like a great friend. I'm wondering though, was he the one that was getting you into trouble back then, or vice versa?
Huh. We were probably both class clowns. We were equal balance to each other.
Oh, well, that's good then.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like you guys were a good match. Now, when I listened to you talk about how that encounter played out, I was going to ask you about this, but I decided to just wait until tonight. Mm-hmm. Which one of you was more traumatized by the experience without revealing any details of the encounter?
I want to say he was. And we'll leave it at that. I'll explain why I think that throughout the story. But I think he was more or less more shocked than I was, So
Yeah, and I can understand why. When you talked about the details of how everything played out, that does make sense. But you never know. If you would have been more sensitive than he was to a certain point, then you might have been the one who was more traumatized by it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, it could have easily been that way. I just absolutely hate the idea that that happened to you. I mean, look at how young you were, and to
Yeah.
have an experience like that where you two were convinced that you were literally running for your lives from a werewolf.
Hmm.
That's just horrible.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not good at all. As the title suggests, speaking of that, when you were chased by that quote unquote werewolf that night,
Hmm.
did you ever try rebuking it?
No, but and as I told you, I've always been a spiritual person. I don't think I found the need really to rebuke it. I was just more questioning on why these things happened, you know. Um, so no, I don't think we rebuked it at all. So
And you can't be faulted for that. You're doing good to know your own names. You guys are so freaked out, understandably so, that, yeah, like I said, you can't be faulted.
yeah,
Did having that experience have an effect on your faith, though?
it opened me more up to the unknown or outside of the box. It never discouraged my faith to God or my spiritual belief, um, but it definitely opened my eyes to there's so much more in this world that we have no idea what's going on out here, and um, so yeah.
Yeah, that's a fact. You found that out firsthand. Do you think your faith might have played a factor in you having that experience in the first place?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've always been in tune to a spiritual presence ever since I was a kid, or been an empath, and I think it definitely had a cause and effect to what happened that night.
Yeah, that's not unusual. Have an experience like that, it's either going to draw you closer to God or further away. In most
Yeah,
cases, the answer is it's going to draw you closer. But
yeah.
you never know. People respond differently to experiences like that. So you never do know. Do you think that divine intervention is why you're here today, though? Or do you think that you're still here due to another reason?
Oh, I think it's all divine intervention. I don't believe in coincidence. I think we all have a special role in life. Um, so yeah, I think it's all divine intervention.
I agree. I think we do all have a role. So we're on the same page there. All right, Austin, please tell us about this encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
All right, guys. So let's see. We were in the eighth grade. We were just being kids, and we're walking in the neighborhood. I'd say it's about 2 a.m. At night. It's a clear summer night. Um, it's warm, and we're enjoying ourselves. And as we're walking back, from the end of the cul-de-sac, and we ventured throughout the whole neighborhood, and that neighborhood is pretty big itself. It's not a small area. And mind you, as we're coming back, there's this hill that that we came upon, and as we got to this hill, I'm looking up at the star, and I felt in tune to the star. It was a bright, illuminate star in the sky, and it was radiating all these like different colors from the star itself, and so I felt like it was calling me. Um, and as we're sitting here, I have my buddy Wade with me. He's goofing off and he's being himself, and me as spiritual as I am and being an empath, I'm just staring at the star the whole time because I'm so focused on what I'm feeling from this star. And I look at him and I say, Wade, we have to go into these woods, and he's like, what? You're crazy. We can't go in these woods. Uh, and mind you, we're still up on top of the hill, as this conversation is happening. And as I start walking down the hill into the field, there's this huge field. I mean, it's almost like an acre of land, as far as width wise. And there's just a bunch of woods that surround, you know, the very back of it and wraps around. So as we're going down the hill, and I decide to walk into the woods or go towards the woods because I feel called to the star. I feel like the star is calling me to walk into the woods for whatever reason. Um, and I had no fear. I had no fear based on that. I was driven off faith just off that feeling. And as I'm walking, my friend, being who he was, I think he was more concerned about why am I doing this, but he followed me anyways. And um, we get about maybe not even 100 yards away from the woods, and next thing you know, this big 7 foot, 8 foot tall wolfman, dogman approaches up out of the woods, and um, it was shocking to say the least. He was very very tall. It was almost like a grayish white blackish coat. Um, his hind legs was massive, and now mind you, as this happened, guys, if whoever's listening, if as this happened, we're we're shocked. I mean, as soon as this thing comes out of the woods, our our eyes and our whole body froze, but it was like a split of 2 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. It was just one of those moments where I don't know if anybody's experienced to where something happens or you're like a deer caught in the headlights, and we really had no time to react but to turn and run, you know. And prior up to this point, as I stated before, I'm following my intuition because I felt a calling to the star, um, and whatever reason it was for this dog man to come out of the woods, I felt like it had interference towards that. But as this thing came out of the woods and we're stuck froze solid, uh, we book it. We have no desire to turn back. We didn't rebuke it. We were literally scared for our lives. We thought this thing was going to rip our head off. I mean, when you would have saw this thing, it was legit 8 foot tall. Its head looked like a dog. And how fast of the moment it was. It's like you caught the description, but we were so scared we jetted. And as we're running up this hill, I mean, this field is like 500 yards. I mean, we're near the woods at this moment, so I mean, we got a ways to run. It's just a wide open field until you get up to the point of the hill or the cul-de-sac. And so as we're booking it and we're hauling, we know this thing's chasing us because as soon as we got up out of this trance of just being frozen, shock of seeing this monster coming out of the woods, you know, we felt the presence of it running because we knew that was the only way. We knew that was the only thing happening. That was really. So as we're running, my friend gets tripped up. I hear him thump. I'm booking it. I'm already up on top of the hill. Um, and as I get to the top of the hill, I witness him turn around after he thumped. And when he thumped and turned around, there was no dog man. And I looked at him and I looked down to the horizon of the field. It was almost like the dog man vanished, like it went through a portal almost to say. There was just no trace. And if you were to explain to somebody at that moment how quick everything happened, they wouldn't have believed you, because when I tell you it went from 0 to 100 from the time he chased us up to the hill, there was no trace. Um, and as this happened, we're so, I don't even think in fear was really the cause of our emotion. We were more or less shocked of everything that happened, because the sequence of me being, spiritual and following the star and feeling called to approach the woods was already, a risk in itself. And right after the moment of us approaching these woods, you have this monster that approaches and comes out and chases you. And I think we were just more or less shocked instead of scared. And as it happened, we're up on the hill. we noticed the thing completely disappeared. That's when my buddy Wade said he felt like something grabbed his foot and tripped him, you know. And I figured he just tripped, you know. And I completely, you know, believed him at that time because what we seen and what we were running from. My only question is, or my only mindset was, why did it not harm us and why did it not eat us? Because, and I'm sure he was thinking the same way. And mind you, when I got to the top of the hill and we ran away from this thing, as I'm looking down and I see Wade turn around, he looks back up at me and his eyes are as wide as quarters, you know, and it's just like pan. He's like, you can imagine we're literally running for our life, so we're out of breath. And I remember it vividly as yesterday. He's just like panning and has his eyes wide open. I'm panning, and we're just shell shocked, and we're running off adrenaline. And finally, we end up going back to his house, and just really, we couldn't really fathom on what we saw. So it was kind of really like a moment of clarity for us, but we never really openly discussed about it towards really anybody, you know, after the fact it happened. I think there was only about maybe one or two people I've told throughout my life, and that was my adulthood. Um, and I don't know if he's told anybody himself other than me. Um, and I think when it comes to me being a spiritual person, like I said earlier and before the story, I think it was really I think it really had to play an effect of not wanting us to go into the woods, you know. And then I asked the question, if I would have gotten into these woods, if I would have, you know, stood on faith or was firm, what would have happened if I got into the woods and, you know, I'm getting this calling from this star, quote unquote. What if something would have happened then, you know, other than a dogman approaching us and scaring us away? Um, and we never went back after that. We never walked back. We never went back to that field. Um, but it was a memory that never left our minds, and it was a very crucial moment, you know. Uh, and until this day, I still think about it every once in a while. Uh, and it really fascinates the idea of knowing why and how it happened, as I said earlier. And that's really the biggest part, you know. And I was reading other stories about people having other encounters, you know, and um, I was trying to get similarities off maybe description of the same thing that we saw, and there was a lot of the descriptions that kind of, you know, resembled off the one that we saw, but I'd say the one we saw was more of like silver. You know, it had gray, white, silver hair, you know. And the more that I think about it, the whole field was illuminated by light. It was a clear sky, you know. I'm already following the stars, so the whole field is illuminated by the moon. So I'm pretty sure it was a full moon that night. And we were just being kids, you know. Um, got scared for our lives. It was definitely an experience that you'll never forget.
Paul, that's a given right there. Yeah, guaranteed. You didn't give too many details regarding how that dog man looked, so now I'm going to ask you if there's anything else you can recall about its appearance.
Yeah, so it was very very big and muscular. His claws had about maybe 5-inch claws at the time. You couldn't even really see his face. You seen that at the outer look of it being a dog, and it growled at us. I think that's what really scared us out of the most is, you know, and I'm glad you said that because I don't even think I've told you this yesterday. But as it came out of the woods, it made this, you know, growling noise. You know, it made this defensive noise. And uh this thing was your typical average, you know, almost looking this werewolf looking creature. Its hind legs were massive. It almost looked very muscular, you know, but not so defined where you can see its muscles. You've only seen more or less how built and how tall he was. Um, and yeah, that's really the description, the only description I have of him, because like I said, we booked it right after it happened. Um, and we were running for our lives. There was not a moment. Well, I know for a fact, whenever we seen that creature, we thought we were going to die, you know. Um, and I think that was the biggest blessing for us at that moment, when we're on top of the hill, realizing that, oh my gosh, we're still alive. Because as we looked back and he was gone, I think that's another reason why we were such in shock, because we were like, oh my gosh, that thing didn't eat us, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you had so many thoughts going through your heads at the time. You were having a hard time knowing which way was up, and
Yeah.
understandably so.
Yes.
What do you think it would have done, though, if the two of you wouldn't have bolted?
That is a good question. That's a question that I, try to understand, or maybe question myself today. I'm not real sure. I want to say that it probably would have scared us off either way, just because, you know, um, I feel as if it didn't want us going into the woods itself. Um, but I also ask, what if we want to run, like you said, what if we would have just stayed?
I've got ideas on about how it would have responded. It probably would have just come up to you and tried to intimidate you and frighten you, but it's hard to say. You never know. It's really hard to know.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, guys. I don't. I think I lost you, Vic.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? That's not good. How about now? Can you hear me? Hmm. Hang on, everyone. I'm going to try sending Austin a text here to get this resolved. I'll be right back. All right, everyone. I just asked him to leave the studio and come back in, so he should pop back in any second now. In the meantime, while we're waiting for him to come back, I could always sing a song. We just need to decide what song I should sing. Let's check out the live chat for any suggestions. Up, too late. He's back.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. I lost
Oh,
Wi-Fi. It's actually raining over here my way.
oh, that's not your fault. Things happen, no problem.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, after you.
Well, as I was saying though, I think I was at the just the moment of, if we would have stayed and not ran away, I don't think, you know I think it was in such defense mode. We don't know if it would have ate us or not. We don't know what would have happened. And then I asked the question, you know, is it possible if I could have just walked in the woods, and not been so fearful of the creature itself, but off instinct, seeing it and knowing how phenomenal it was, we were automatically just scared. So I don't even think we had that question.
Oh no, lost him again. Hopefully it's not going to be too long for he realizes that he dropped out and he clicks back in. I'll keep an eye out for him. Let's see now. What was I talking about before he came back into the studio here. I think I asked you guys to do something. What was that? Let's see. No, I didn't ask if you wanted me to dance. What was it? Oh, well, maybe I'll remember it here shortly. Oh, yeah, like Diane says. She's reminding me I said I was going to sing, but we haven't picked a song yet. What song? Fiverr Geek says my Bigfoot Encounter song. I don't sing that song. That's Nathan Brumley. And you wouldn't believe how many times I get messages from people. Hey, Vic, what's the name of that song in the intro and the outro for your Bigfoot show? My Bigfoot sighting. And I put the artist and the name of the song right there in the description for the show. I'm thinking, oh man, it's right there. Christina Easterday wants me to sing Country Road. I like John Denver, but yeah, me singing that song wouldn't be pretty. Oh, another vote for Country Road. Hopefully, Austin's going to click back in here soon. Nothing like live talk radio, huh? Send him a text message and see where he's at. I'll be right back. All right, guys, I just sent him another text message. So what we're going to do is, while we're waiting for him to come back in, we're going to do a little Dogman Q&A, since you guys can't decide which song you want me to sing. So please post any questions that you have for me about Dogman, any general questions, period. And we'll just get into that while we're waiting for him to come back. He must be having one heck of a storm to have all these problems. All right, let's see who's got the first question for me. Still no question. Okay, Dylan found one. Xbox wants to know how old I am. That's funny. Let's see here. Yeah, there's Dylan's question. He wants to know, is Dogman a werewolf? Well, it's possible. Anything in this crazy world is possible. If a subatomic particle called a quark can wink in and out of existence, which they can, anything is possible. So I'm not going to shoot it down and say it's not possible. I will tell you that when doctors when they're pre-med and learning how to become doctors, one of the things that they're trained when they're learning how to diagnose illnesses is that basically Occam's razor. If you hear hooves clicking on the floor behind you, think horse, not zebra. In other words, it could be a zebra that you hear, but horses are so much more common. So it's a lot more likely to be a horse than it is to be a zebra. And the same thing holds true here. Are dogmen creatures or beings that look the way they do 24/7, 365? Or are we dealing with people who somehow have the ability to shapeshift using magic from the form of a human to that of a beast that can have 3, 4, 5, 6 times as much mass as the human they transformed from? Well, somehow, some way, maybe that's possible, but that's much harder to swallow than it just being a being or a creature that looks that way 24/7, 365. Liz M says Vic is 30. You're too kind. Let's see. The next question I'm going to pop up is from Josh, and he wants to know where are the dogmen found in the U.S.? I've heard northern Michigan is rife with them. Well, you'd be surprised. I don't get all that many encounters coming in from Michigan compared to other places. Yeah, they do come in from Michigan, but there are other places that more encounters come from. Right now, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, seems like they have quite a few more encounters coming in than Michigan now. So, well, also too, to answer your question, these guys are all over. I mean, they are literally all over. In fact, there was a guy about 7-8 years ago from Rhode Island. I never will forget it. He contacted me to basically thumb his nose. He said something along the lines of, haha, I don't have to worry about any dogman encounters here. I live in Rhode Island. So I thought about it and I thought, should I or shouldn't I let him know that there's a dogman that's been seen so many times in Rhode Island? The locals have a nickname for it. Well, of course, it being me, I decided to send him a link to that article. But yeah, sure, he got a kick out of that. The next question I'm going to address is from Liz M. Liz wants to know, do you think they use portals or dimension shifts? Well, I've spoken with my fair share of credible eyewitnesses who've reported seeing things like that, so I'm definitely open to it. It's definitely possible. The next one I'm going to ask or address is from Alex Midnight, and he wants to know, say if one kills the dogman, can you eat them? Yeah, I don't even know what to say about that. Let's find another question. Let's see. Baby wants to know, are dogmen natural or supernatural? That's a good question. That's the $1 million question right there. When you do what I do for as long as I've done it, and you're exposed to as many eyewitnesses as I am and have been, you talk with so many credible eyewitnesses who report experiencing things from these guys that point soundly towards them being just flesh and blood creatures with no special abilities. And you go for a stretch where you notice a trend that way, and then before you know it, another direction, another group of eyewitnesses comes by and they tell you about all these experiences they've had where when they tell you about the things they've experienced and witnessed these guys do, it points soundly towards them being supernatural beings. So I really can't tell you. Maybe some dogmen, a certain percentage, are flesh and blood creatures, while others are ethereal beings. I don't know. I really can't answer that question for you. Let's find another good question. There was one up above. I need to scroll back up here and find. Boy, the chat's just rolling. Where was that question? It's not that one. Okay. There's a juicy one right there. Rob Mack wants to know, why do you think the government keeps it a secret that dogman exists? Well, that's easy right there. Think about how poorly we dealt with COVID. People panicked. We didn't handle that well at all. Now imagine what the fallout would be from the government coming out and officially acknowledging the fact that, guess what, people, in the woods that's closest to you, you just might have creatures out there that look like giant werewolves. Just imagine how that would go over. In our day-to-day lives, we rely on so many things that are harvested from the forest, from the lumber we use in our homes and buildings, and for paper, and all the medicines that are derived from plants and all sorts of other things. If all of a sudden it was let out of the bag that, guess what, you might have something that looks like a giant werewolf or werewolves, plural, in your local forest, who's going to want to go into that forest? Who's going to want to run a noisy chainsaw 10, 12 hours out of the day, out of the workday, when they can't hear anything behind them, they can't see anything behind them? Who's going to want to do that? Almost overnight, the lumber industry would falter, and along with it would go our whole economy, the world's economy. So the government's smart to not let this secret out of the bag. It's a dichotomy, though, because on one hand, I can appreciate the fact that they want to keep our economy and our way of life going by keeping this under wraps. On the other hand, you've got so many Dogman eyewitnesses who have these encounters. They can't come out and get help from their families and significant others because they know they're going to be teased and derided. So it's really a mixed bag on that. On one hand, I'm glad the government doesn't let it out to the bag. On the other hand, I hate the idea that they don't. Hope that answers your question there. Let's look for another question. Here's a tough one here from Ruth G. She wants to know, how's your night going, Vic? It's going great. Thanks for asking. I hope yours is going even better. The next one is from Scott Baker, and Scott wants to know, what's the fastest Dogman can run? Well, they can run faster on all fours than they can on two legs. All we can do is just guess how fast they can actually top out at bipedally or quadrupedally, but I've had some credible eyewitnesses report seeing them run 45-ish or so on two legs, maybe tickling 50, and then on all fours over 60. But we don't know what the limits of their abilities are. Maybe they can top out at 70 or so on all fours. So it's really hard to say. This next one is from Earth Angel, and she wants to know what the earliest year of a Dogman encounter was. Well, in 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan, that was the earliest documented Dogman encounter that's ever been reported. So they go way back. Let's find another one. A lot of these aren't in all caps, so they're hard to find. Here's one from Wandering Bull 369, and it reads, do you think they use trees as portals to manifest and leave the realm? Well, it's possible. I don't know. All I can do is guess on that, but like everything else, it's possible. Let's find another one. Let's see, scroll down here a bit. This one is from Marvin Johnson. Out of all the cryptids around the world that people hear about, which ones do you believe are real besides Bigfoot and Dogmen? Crawlers, skinwalkers, Mothman, etc. Well, I believe in the existence of rakes. I believe in the existence of skinwalkers, although I don't think that's considered as a cryptid. Then Mothman, I believe in Mothman as well. I can't really think of a cryptid that I've heard about that I don't believe in. I know sheep squatch is pretty hard to believe, and bat squatch as well, but if a lot of these other cryptids are out there, then who's to say that those guys aren't? Hope that answers your question there. The next one I'm going to answer is from Earth Angel, and she wants to know, do you ever hear from Brandon talking about Brandon Close? That was episode 190, Angel. Hope that answers your question there. And no, after it was episode 207 aired, I lost contact with Brandon. I did see Brandon leaving a comment to one of the episodes about maybe 6 months ago. That was a rude comment, so I banned his butt. But yeah, back when 2007 aired, I tried to reach out to him, but like I said, never did hear back from him. Let's find another one. It always cracks me up when people come on the show as guests, and then down the road you hear them making nasty comments or see them making nasty comments about other eyewitnesses. Give me a break. Get out of here. Got no time for that crap. Let's see. Especially when you consider I protected them to the best of my ability to make sure that they didn't get any nasty blowback from people that listen to their episodes. And then let's see. No, that's not a question. If you have a question, please remember to type it in all caps so I don't miss it. Wow, this makes me feel old. Ruth G says, I've been listening to you since I was 11 years old. Now I'm 18. That makes me feel good, but I'm glad you've been listening so long. Thanks so much for listening, Ruth. I appreciate it. Looks like Liz wants to know, do you have a map making marks where are the sightings? Well, I think she means where the sightings have happened. And is there a pattern? Well, if you go to dogmanencounters.com and visit the About Dogman page, you'll see that there's a link to a map like that. And I forgot the lady's name. Anna, I believe is her name. She tracks things like where Dogman encounters happen, and she's got this virtual map with pins in it, like you're asking about. But I don't set time aside to do anything like that. No. And I don't worry about patterns where Dogman encounters happen. I just focus on trying to help the eyewitnesses come to terms with their experiences. Let's see, for this next question is from Alex Midnight. He wants to know experiments gone wrong. Question mark. It's possible. It is possible, but here's a problem with that. Some dogmen could be created in test tubes, government laboratory test tubes, but that wouldn't explain away all of the existence of dogmen because, like I just mentioned a bit ago, there's a documented sighting back in 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan. We didn't have anything approaching the technology to make a test tube dogman back then. So if there are test tube dogmen now, present day, some are test tube dogmen while a certain part of the population is naturally occurring. Something to think about. Next question is from Jamie Hecht. And Jamie wants to know, what color eyes do dogmen usually have? Well, most dogmen that are reported to me have amber eyes, and then that's followed up by red eyes, and then some have blue eyes. A very small percentage of the dogmen that people tell me about seeing have blue eyes, and some have greenish eyes. So I hope that clears that up for you. And then William Vertrees wants to know, how do I contact you to tell my tale? Well, I hope it's an actual experience, not a tale, but if you want to contact me about it, then please go to dogmanencounters.com, submit a report. If you do that, then William, then I'll contact you and schedule a phone consultation so we can have a good talk about it. The next question is from Robert Wolf. Hey, Vic, would you ever do eyewitness encounters with gnomes, little people, elves, etc.? No, I don't have any plans for doing that. I don't. They're interesting topics, but that's not my bag, baby. Let's see. The next one is from Fred Caserta. And Fred wants to know what the largest group of people to witness in a dogman all at once was. I can't really recall. I can't remember. That's a good question. Maybe 3-4 people, maybe 5, but I can't really recall. All right. It looks like we've got Austin back. Thanks again for coming back.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, Vic. I'm sorry about that. My phone died and I lost signal as well, and we're back on the air.
Well, we're glad to have you back, like I said.
All right.
Let's see, where were we?
I believe we were talking about the emotion we had once we ran into the dogman. In the description I was given, again, like I said, he was like 7 foot, 8 foot tall, very muscular, had a white, silver, maybe brownish, blackish hair. Again, it was nighttime, so you seen more of it was almost like a gray coat more than anything. You've seen how long and how lanky his legs and his arms were, and as I was saying, whenever he popped out of the woods, he almost made this scaring tactic of like a growl, Now, mind you, here's a good question, or here's a good theory. I think this thing was watching us from the time I was up on the hill, and I was feeling the intuition and the emotion of following the star before we entered the field and getting close to the woods. And I say this because you you felt like nothing was surrounding you, and you didn't have no whereabouts of this thing near. It didn't howl beforehand. Everything was peaceful, everything was quiet, and the next thing you know, this thing just pops out like in an instant. um so it almost makes me curious, almost makes me feel like it was watching us at the time of, you know before it all happened. um I've never ran into an issue of having or seeing the Dogman since this time. um this was a once in a time phenomenal sight for me and my friend. And I think that's why the memory and the longevity of the memory holds on so long, because how phenomenal it was and how scary it was at the same time. um and you asked me before if who was more traumatized during that moment. And I think off the way I was feeling and my motives of following the star into the woods, I felt like, I was more firm. I would say I wasn't as more I wasn't as fearful than I was shocked. And I felt like my buddy was, I think we were both scared. I think my buddy was just confused and more scared at the time, just because of the sequence of me saying, "Oh man, I feel connected to the star," and we're walking. That's a mystery in itself. And then next thing you know, here comes this creature out of the woods. And you know, um, I just, like I said earlier on the podcast, that you remember his face. His face was just like he's seen a ghost. You know, and we basically did, except it was the Wolfman. It I don't want to say it was like a demonic feeling. When you seen this thing come out of the woods, and this peaceful mindset that I was feeling, because I was at peace with myself as I'm walking. I had no fear. I'm like, oh man, the star is calling me into the woods. It's 2 a.m. at night. It's a summer night, and here we go. We're about to walk in the woods. So that didn't scare us. It was the fact that we seen the Dogman pop out. And you know it I don't want to say it had a demonic feeling to it, but I don't want to necessarily say it had a good omen to it as well. You know, um, I feel like it was trying to protect something or keep us out of those woods. Um, whether it was driving us away out of fear, or it could have been protecting itself. Um, but it was very, very surprising and unknown.
Oh, I'm sure it was. How close did it seem to get to you two at its closest point?
Yeah, so whenever we came down from the hill, walking into the field, like I said, we were about 100 yards away from the woods. And so, as we're diagonal, we're this is a wide open field, and we're walking diagonal towards the corner of the woods. And he pops out maybe in the middle, you know, um, and we're maybe like 50 yards away from this thing, or less. So it was a very vivid sight. But being so young, and being how long ago it was, if I would have elaborated on this story back then, I probably could have gave you more of a detail. um but the figure and the shape, and the emotion, and seeing it in general was, it's a sight that's still inside my mind. And uh we weren't that far from it at all. I think that's what baffled us, also, is being so close to that thing. How did we get away, and why? Because it easily could have just captured us and hawked us down. you know um and I fully believe my buddy too, because I was way past my buddy whenever we were running away. I'm a pretty fast guy. And um like I said, when he thumped and he said that he felt like something grabbed his foot, I wholeheartedly believe him. Um, and then again, how that thing got away so fast, because By the time he thumped on the ground, we were already halfway up the hill. And before we got to up the hill, you were on flat ground running through the field. So it just makes you think on that level why it didn't harm us.
Something I want to make sure you never forget about our first conversation is the fact that you didn't get away that night. It allowed you to get away.
Mm-hmm.
And like we also spoke about at length, when it comes to coming to terms with a Dogman encounter, it's all in how you look at what happened. I mean, you can make this as easy on yourself to deal with or as hard to deal with as possible. I know this isn't a choice most eyewitnesses make. The subconscious, it plays a big part. It takes a while to be able to look at your Dogman encounter with a level head, especially when you have a really traumatic one. But the focus should be with eyewitnesses on trying to look at their encounters accurately for what really happened. And that right there, the whole "we got away" mentality, that's something I see time after time in eyewitnesses, that just like with you, I try to hammer home the importance of realizing that no, you're allowed to get away. It's the same thing if the Dallas Cowboys played the best high school football team in the country. If they played 100 times, like we talked about in our first conversation, the Cowboys are going to win 100 out of those 100 times. It doesn't matter if the Cowboys are having a bad day, if they play in a snowstorm, if they play in a heat wave. The talent, the capabilities of the players on the Cowboys, it is so much greater than the capabilities and talents of that high school football team's players that there's never going to be a time or a way that high school team could win because they were so outclassed. Well, with you two were so outclassed that day that it's the same thing. If that Dogman wanted to catch you, you two were got. So yeah, try not to lose sight of that, which it sounds like you've been doing a really good job of keeping that in mind. So
Yeah,
it's good.
absolutely. Thank you. And you know what? You're absolutely right about that. And to question on that, it 100% allowed us to get away. You know, um, I also think could have there have been a divine intervention in that maybe, and I'm not saying that I'm not debunking off what you said. Possibly, is it possible that God or whatever higher consciousness or being or thing could have subconsciously told that creature, to stop? But who knows? Then you question that, But either the fact of the matter is, like you said, this thing was way faster than us, way bigger, way stronger. It had vicious claws, vicious teeth, made a distinct growl, you know, um, and there's just no way that it could have not hurt us or caught us. You know what I mean? Um, and I think that's a blessing in itself. I think having the experience and being able to see what we saw that night, whether we got frightened and whether it took us away from not going into the woods and me following that star, um, I find it to be a blessing to experience something that night. Um, and as phenomenal as it was and as scary as it was, it don't really bother me till today. Like I said, I think it's just the fact of knowing and unknowing why and how it happened, and especially the sequence of us walking through the neighborhood, um, you know me finally looking up to this star and feeling high in tune and conscious, and the next thing you know, we're taking a trip of faith into these woods, and this creature just appears and just chases us away. um it's very it's interesting, you know
Yeah, interesting doesn't do it any credit. I agree. Did it make a lot of noise when it was coming after you two, or was it pretty quiet?
so I think that's what I was saying earlier. It was very we didn't hear nothing, you know when we're walking in this field, like I said, we were at peace, or at least I was. Maybe my friend was more already confused or thinking like, why in the heck are we walking in these woods? Um, but when it popped out, it had to have been not even 5 or 10 yards inside of the woods, because it literally popped out and you didn't hear a thing. You didn't hear ruffles. You didn't hear like it was running through the woods and then it popped out. It was almost like it just popped out and it just scared us off and it chased us. And as it chased us, we thought like, oh, we're done for. And we get up there and we're shocked that we're still alive and that he's completely vanished, or whatever it was.
There are a lot of freaky things about dogmen, but one of the freakiest things is how quiet they can be when they want to. It's just not fair. It's not. Were either you or Wade making any noises as you were running?
Yeah, so I think we were screaming for our lives.
Huh.
You know what? Now that you mentioned that, and that memory comes back to my mind as we're running and we're screaming because we're kids and we just seen this terrifying thing. I think, and like I said, this doesn't disrespect your theory off of, it could have easily got us, because it could have. It definitely allowed us to get away. But I also think, what if it just got scared because we were in an open field screaming for our lives and it didn't want to be seen? You know, I think that. So there's so many, you know, things you can, try to comprehend about the situation. And I ended up telling you that the other night or yesterday, and I try not to dwell so much on those things. Um, and I think that also still what makes it so fascinating, you know?
I do know. Yeah, there are a lot of fascinating aspects to all this. There definitely are. If it did trip Wade, why do you think it did that if it didn't want to hurt either of you two?
Um, that is a very good question. That's something I really can't answer. Uh, Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was to let you know it was real. Um, and like I said, maybe maybe there was a divine intervention. Maybe there was something else looking out for us that night. There's just no telling. But as he said that, and I remember when, as soon as it happened, and when we turned back and we realized it was gone, and he looked at me with these bug eyes and said, it felt like something grabbed his foot. I almost didn't believe it. Because we were so in shock. We we just could not fathom the fact that this huge creature popped out of the woods. And then after him telling me that, it felt like something grabbed him, I'm just in complete shock. Uh so yeah, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure you were in complete shock. That's understandable. When Wade went down, how much distance did you put between the two of you before you realized he had fallen?
I want to say we were probably maybe 10 feet away, maybe
Hmm.
maybe even less, maybe 10 or 5 feet away. you know um he definitely wasn't as far as me, but I was ahead of him. And yeah, it is that was interesting. That's actually a very good question to think about or really ask, because I don't know why it would grab his foot. And then and like I said, and see, this is what's so crazy, Vic. As we're running up this hill, and mind you, this field is like an acre of land. You know, so before we even get up to the hill, back up to the street, before we follow the star, um, there's it's a ways to go. So how could it just vanish out of thin air? And maybe it did hit a portal. Maybe it didn't. Um, Maybe it's so fast it could just go like that. Um, but that question in itself, when we were already up the hill and you have all this other land behind you before the woods is even at a stopping point, it's just fascinating how you had no trace once you looked back and you didn't see a thing, you know.
Yeah, there are a lot of aspects to what happened that night that leave you scratching your head and wondering what in the world was that all about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Are you disappointed by how you responded to it coming after you that night?
Not really. Because I don't really have no regrets in my life. I'm a firm believer on that. Uh, I think that I think what really just gets me is what would have happened if we wouldn't have ran away. What would have happened if we would have entered those woods and I would have kept looking up at the sky and following this star that I felt like it was calling me inside my intuition or my soul. Um, you know, it's so much just like a what if these things would have occurred if we wouldn't have ran type deal, you know. But there's not really any regrets.
That's good, because there really is no benefit to worrying about shoulda, coulda, wouldas. You did the best you could to deal with an extremely difficult, traumatic experience, and I think you deserve a lot of credit for how you did. You did well.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
you're welcome. You told us about that light in the sky that you saw. Can you remember if you happened to hear any unusual ambient noises, sounds before the Dogman made its presence known?
Yeah, it wasn't really, like I said, it was a peaceful setting. I didn't hear nothing but just, silence. It was more or less just me feeling an emotion, when, and I don't know if I want to say it was the brightest star in the sky. So it was definitely radiating, and I just felt more. It was more of an emotion, a feeling. There wasn't really any sounds. It was a cool summer night, clear sky, and it was just very peaceful before anything got, disturbed and disrupted out of the dog man coming out of the woods.
Full disclosure, the reason why I asked you about that is I was wondering if you heard any drumming or droning or any sounds like that in the background.
Yeah, so that's no, not that I can recall. There wasn't literally a plane in the sky. There wasn't literally there. It was a still, calm night
Until that dog man popped up.
until that dog man popped up. And I mean, and as soon as he popped up, I mean, it changed the whole vibe. It changed the whole mindset. It changed the whole, you know, me going into the woods. It literally blockade every emotion and everything that was happening that night. You know what I mean? It was just a whole complete turn.
You two sure did go through the ringer. You really did.
Yes.
How long did it take you to come back down after you made it home?
Oh, that's a good question. After we seen this thing and we got away and realized what we saw and like I said before, I think Wade was already confused on why he's following his friend into the woods because he feels called to the star. Um, so for Wade, I'm not real sure. I think I could only imagine what was going on in his mind. Um, but when we got back and as we're talking about it and at first I remember walking back to his house, we didn't say a word. you know um we were just trying to get back to his house, and then getting settled in, we were we're questioning, what was that thing, did you see that, and all this other, it was just more questioning. And of course we were still startled a little bit. uh So yeah, I think that's really it on that.
How far was Wade's house from where that experience happened?
Oh, that's a good question. I want to say gosh, maybe 2 or 3 football fields away, maybe even longer than that.
And I'm sure you made record time getting back there too, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll bet you did.
Mm-hmm.
How compromised were you in the weeks and months that came after that experience?
So it was a thing that we kind of just, and I think everybody handles certain experiences or situations differently. People cope with things differently. But it was one of them things. We didn't, we weren't phased, and I think it was us being kids. Maybe it's a good thing it happened when we were kids. Who is to say if I seen the dog man today, I wouldn't be more traumatized than I was now or was then. Um, but neither here nor there. I think we just went on about our daily lives. It was one of them things where we just kept it to ourselves and, you know, um, just really didn't dwell on it. We just kept moving on, kept moving forward. Uh, Maybe we talked about it once or twice after it happening. Um, but we never told a soul. I don't know if he told anybody. Um, but I know I never told a soul. I know that, um, that's something that we never really hardly brought up at all. Um, and of course, down the road, I've told a few people, as far maybe like one or two people. I've told a stranger uh, who I met one time, and I think that was the very first time I opened up to it.
If you're on the outside looking in, it could be really hard to understand how a dogman encounter eyewitness could have an experience like this, especially at the age that he was at, and not tell everyone about the experience. But that's how it goes sometimes. There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people out there who have encounters and they don't tell anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on how a person decides to try to adapt to cope with their experience. People have different ways of dealing with things.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you wouldn't handle it that way, that it doesn't mean that other people would do it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So just a good way to think about it and something to consider. Why didn't you tell your mother about that experience? You were 13 years old after all.
That's actually a real good question. I think you know what, and I during that time, I could tell my mom anything, but that was just something that it was just so personal to me. I think it was so personal to me, and the me know I just knew it. It's just maybe the sequence before it happened and before we got scared off when he came out of the woods. I think it was such a personal moment and a spiritual moment for me, and a phenomenal moment that it I knew nobody would understand or nobody could relate. That's how I felt at the time. So to me, there was really no need to openly express or tell my mom or tell another friend or tell a teacher or tell this person and that person. It was just more or less coping with the idea and the fascination of the emotions I had before it led up to us getting scared and seeing the dog man. Um, so yeah, I don't know why I didn't tell my mom. I just think it was more on a personal level for me. I think it was just a thing where it's like maybe it's meant for you and him or meant for you type deal. Who knows?
Well, like I said, to a lot of people, it might seem strange that you didn't tell her, but we all have our ways of dealing with things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Oh.
Now that we've established that you didn't tell your mom about what happened, did you ever by chance ask her about the possibility of moving due to a mistaken belief that if you did relocate, that would remove the possibility of having another dogman encounter?
So yeah, no, it never got to that point. Nothing. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Nothing ever happened to the point where we had to move because I felt traumatized or because I never even told her. But it was a thing. It never stopped us from going back into the woods as kids. Of course, I still lived my daily life and did my thing as a kid, but we didn't go back to that area. um, and I think that yeah, I just yeah,
Huh. Yeah, I'll bet you didn't go back.
yeah.
I understand why. Do you think keeping all this under wraps the way you did had a negative effect on you by chance?
Um, you know that's I want to. That's hard to say because I was so young and it happened. Like I said, I don't think it really traumatized me or hindered me from being a kid and living my life. Um, it was just more or less the fact of the unknown of why did we see this thing, why did it pop out, why did I feel like I was called to the star and want to walk into the woods at 2 a.m. and I'm just in the 8th grade. So there's a lot of questions involved in that. Uh, but yeah, I don't think it hindered me anyway, at least to my knowledge, or so.
Well, that's good. Thank goodness for that. And 13, I mean, that's heading right into the teeth of a very difficult, awkward stage of your life,
Mm,
of all the things to happen. I hate
mm,
the fact it happened to you guys. That's
mm,
horrible.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, it was very scary. Like I said, and I'm such an open-minded person, and I'm such, I'm so firm in where I'm at. Um, like I told you, it was kind of a looking back at it. I'm glad I experienced it. I'm glad I got to see and visualize and have those emotions that we were having that night. In spite of us getting scared away and thinking that we're about to die. Because looking back at it, like I said, who, and there's not many people. I think we talked about this yesterday. You know, I asked you what, but why? Why us? Why me? Or why him? Why her? Why them? Type deal. There's only a few people that see these sightings and get to experience such phenomenal things, and you know, half the majority of the world don't get to experience these things. Um, so I think that's a question, that I've had.
Something to never lose sight of is the fact that there are so many more people who have encounters with these things than you're ever going to know. This is something I made a post on my Facebook page, personal Facebook page, earlier today. My copyright attorney let me know about an encounter that a family member of his had with the
Mm,
Dogman. So that just highlights the fact that so many more people have encounters with these guys, and we're ever going to know. You know people who've had encounters with these guys besides Wade. God bless him. I hate to hear that he passed, but
mm,
Wade's not the only person that you know or knew who had an encounter with one of these guys
mhm,
that you didn't ever hear about. They
mm,
just kept it to themselves. So
mhm.
something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and
Well,
oh, I'm sorry. And I can't, and I will say, I feel like people should open up maybe and be encouraged to talk about it to certain people.
yeah, for most people it does help, but there are people out there who have encounters and talking about it's probably the worst thing they could do. So it just depends on the person. It
Right,
really does.
right.
But having said that, Austin, it's about time for us to get out of here. But before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to put out there for us?
Um, Not really. I hope everybody enjoyed the story. I'm sorry if I ran in circles or stuttered or elaborated. This is my first podcast, and very thankful to be on this podcast. And I hope everybody stays blessed. And if you have any encounters out there, um, no, you're not alone.
That's right. Really good words. Far from it. Well, before you do go, I want to put it out there. I'm not sure we might or might not have a show Friday night. I've got a lot of things going on right now, a lot of moving parts in my life. I'm not sure if I'm going to have a show ready to go Friday or not, but if I don't, then we'll definitely have one next week. So you'll have that one
Okay,
to look forward to at least. But
absolutely.
having said that, Austin, thanks again so much for coming on and sharing the details of that experience with us. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. It was an honor. Like I said, I'm sorry about the trouble I had earlier with the signal and all, and uh, I'll definitely tune into more of your podcasts because I enjoy what you're doing here.
Well, I'll do the best I can to keep the episodes coming. And of course, thanks so much for the good words. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I do. Well, having said that, like I said, thanks again so much for coming on. And of course, have a great night.
All right.
Well, that's another one in the books, everyone. Thanks again so much for listening. And of course, if you had a Dogman encounter that you need help dealing with, or if you'd like to come on the show and share it with the listeners, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you do that, then I'll schedule a phone consultation with you and we'll take it from there. But thanks again so much for listening and have a great night.